Good evening, everyone, and welcome to BT's Fly Tying Friday. Tonight, 9 December 2022, we've got a very special treat. Dutch Baughman is going to tell us about the Christmas spirit. And we'll do a little bit more with split thread stuff, whatever that might be. Hi there, we're the BTs from Boise, Idaho. Let me get that Dutch in here on a side-by-side shot. Yep, that's our buddy Dutch Baughman.
Thank you, Al. Gretchen.
And you know, Dutch, I really screwed up. I forgot to print out your introduction.
Well, that's okay. We don't need that, Al.
Well, anyway, Dutch is a dear friend of ours from Texas.
Do you have anything else to
Need
say?
I say more than that? No, excellent fly tyer. And tonight he is going to be sharing the spirit of Christmas and some incredible fly tying skill set. So let me get him. Remove the spotlight. You got the spotlight now, Dutch. And
well, the one thing we should say about Dutch is all the work he's done on the Learning Center.
oh God, yes.
So, oh, what's that?
Were you in? Was that OBS that I saw just now, Dutch?
Well, it is, Al, and there we go.
Okay, good.
We're set up.
Okay, wonderful. Well, it's all yours, and I'll tell you what. At any point in time you want to talk about the Learning Center in tonight's presentation, please do so. We're very, very impressed with what's going on with that.
Well, thank you, Al and Gretchen. I appreciate that. Appreciate the chance to be tying again with y'all tonight. And before we jump into the Christmas spirit, Al, if you don't mind, I would like to do about a 3-minute tie very quickly. Last year, John Kreft showed us how to tie the IOBO. It ought to be outlawed. It's a pattern that has earned its name. It's a very effective fly pattern, very, very simple. 3 CDC feathers lined up at the tip, but they're tied in with the butts up here, and the tips go back over the bend of the hook. Then you wrap thread from the eye toward the bend, which you see here in this body area. You simply then fold the 3 CD feathers forward and tie them off at the eye, and that's the fly. It's extremely simple, but it's very, very, very effective. So when John was sharing that fly with us last year, it reminded me of a fly that we do locally here, and we call this one the Barely Legal. And it's similar in profile. It's a curved hook, but you'll notice on all of my emerger patterns, I put a glass bead. Most aquatic insect species will generate a gas bubble in their larva stage and assist them in moving or emerging toward the meniscus and the top of the water column. So I think it's appropriate for emerging patterns to have something that looks like a gas bubble. So I put that gas bubble on there, or that glass bead, to replicate the gas bubble. The body is simply a couple of strands, 2 or 3 strands of peacock herl, 1 piece of flash pulled over, just like the IOBO, tie it off. Extremely simple pattern, but this one is very, very effective. As a matter of fact, I tie this one normally as my top fly with an RS2 on the bottom. So to begin this, I went ahead, just to save some time, I went ahead and placed the glass bead and did the thread wrap from behind the glass bead down into the bend of the hook. The next step is to take just 1 piece of flash, and we find the tips. Line up the tips just like this. Go down to the bottom, cut it in half. So we're halving it. And we do that 3 times. We end up with a piece of flash that is a bundle that looks like this, just a bundle of flash. I'm going to make this end even We're tied in right at that spot right there. And wrap toward the bend. Spiral wraps are fine. Getting down into the bend of the hook. Down here. Then I like to rotate my vise, and I'll take about 2 or 3 pieces of peacock herl. And peacock herl, when you buy it strung, it's going to be taken from the bottom part of the peacock feather. The peacock feather is going to be 25 or 35 inches long, and the strands of peacock herl at the bottom are not quite as bushy and full as they are up toward the peacock herl or the eye. So we're going to wrap this just to secure those butts. I'm going to take the thread back to the tie-in spot right here, the peacock herl. Now I'm with the thread staying right in that spot. I'm going to begin to wrap the peacock herl forward, and every wrap of thread advances the tying thread toward the eye. And in the process of doing that, it helps to make those peacock herl flumes just a little bit straighter. And you get a body that looks more full, and you don't have spaces. I'll wrap this all the way up to the glass bead, secure it tightly against the glass bead, go around the thread a couple times, wrap over the glass bead one more time. Now you can tear that off. I typically don't do that. You can get accidents that way. And then after doing that, I'll take this one strand of flash that has been tipped and halved 3 times, and I'm going to twist it. Now you can lay this forward and just lay it over the back like that, but I like to twist it, cord it, if you will. And once it's twisted nice and tight, I'll lay it over the back like a shell back, tie it off right behind the eye, pull straight up for tightening wraps. Straight up. With a couple wraps in front. You can make that wing as long as you want it to be. From here, just a couple quick whip finishes behind the glass bead. And the last thing I do is typically put a little bead of UV resin across that shell back, cure it, it's ready to go. But that's the one we call the barely legal, very, very effective fly. And I like to fish it in combination with the RS2 on the bottom. So now we're going to jump into the Christmas spirit, and we're going to place a round bend hook into the vise and begin to dress the rusty rat. Very, very important that the hook shank be level. I'm going to use red thread. The eye on this pattern is, the head of this pattern is red. And I'm going to begin back here in front, just in front of the hook point, wrapping toward the bend. Stop right at that point. The next element will be a piece of round gold tinsel, gold metal tinsel. Catch this underneath my thread and secure it, wrapping toward the bend. I'm going to stop the wrap right about where the barb would be. Return the thread with even wraps, edge to edge, going back to the hook point. From here, I'm now going to wrap the round tinsel. First, I'll advance my thread just to get it out of the way a little bit. But I'll wrap the round tinsel with the first wrap being right on metal. The next wrap edge to edge going toward the eye. And I'm going to wrap about 4 or 5 turns to place the tag. Return the thread, go around the thread a couple times, secure it. But now I'm going to do something else with this round tinsel. If we think of the hook shank with a clock face, with 12 o'clock being on top, 6 o'clock being on the bottom, 3 on the far side, and 9 on this side. I'm going to turn my vise. I'm going to lay this metal tinsel so it's going to be right about in that 3 o'clock position on the far side of my hook shank, and there I'm going to secure it. Put it in the keeper. At this point, if your tag wraps are not tight, you can use your thumbnail to pooch them together, but you want that tip to be nice and tight. Next step is to select 4 or 5 peacock swords. Now, when the peacock swords are still on the rachis like this, they really look nice. They're curved, they have a nice shape to them and so forth. But something happens when you cut these off. They kind of get a mind of their own and they can get real crazy, but we're going to try to keep them in a nice alignment like they are while they're still on the rachis. So I'm going to come down here and pull down 4 or 5 pieces, cut those off. I'm going to try to keep the curve like it was on the rachis. Bring this to the vise. The tail on this pattern is not very long. It's right about to the bend of the hook. Lay that in place. Straight up, straight up, straight up. I'm going toward the bend now to secure that down to the tip right there. I'm going to wrap forward, and I want the length of that peacock pearl to go to about the 1/3 from the eye spot. I'm going to wrap that forward like this. Now I'm going to wrap back toward the bend. And what I'm trying to do at this point is lay down a pretty smooth edge-to-edge thread base so that the first half of this body will be floss and the second half will be herl. Now, this is an Atlantic salmon pattern, and it has a lot of traditional Atlantic salmon fly techniques and characteristics to it. One of the things we typically would do on a salmon fly like this is, especially one that has body herl that we're going to lay in place right here, that underbody would be white thread. Typically, that's because once that fly gets wet, a white thread as the underbody does not distort the color of the floss that's being used. But in this case, since the floss being used is red and the underbody's red, it doesn't present a problem at all. So I'm going to take a piece of red floss, and this is probably 10 or 12 inches long. I'm going to tie that in right about halfway, right about in this area. Now the next step will be to wrap this floss down toward the tag or the tip and back. And to do that, the technique I like to use is go straight over the top. I'm not pulling on it, I'm just guiding it. And as I come underneath, I grab it with my finger and index, my left index finger and thumb. And as I come straight up, the thumbnail on my middle finger is pressing that up a little bit and keeping that floss flat. And I continue it around, grab it, press it. And I'm laying these edge-to-edge wraps going toward the bend. And I want to make sure that the wrap gets all the way to the base of the peacock sword tail and flush to the tip, right about there. Now I'm going to go back toward the eye. Now, if this was a display type fly, I would be wiggling the silk floss in place so that it bonds better with the underlayer, the first layer down. And I would end up flossing or burnishing this when I'm done. No need to be in a hurry. Flatten that floss as it's coming up. And one thing you'll notice that by doing this technique, one thing you can avoid, something that happens very regularly with floss, and that is as you are wrapping floss, it can tend to splay apart. And it's very annoying, and it affects the sleekness of the body and so forth. But it seems that by doing this technique, I don't have an issue with the floss splaying apart like that. Now, at this point, I'm going to take the thread and tie off the floss. And I'm going to do several wraps of thread for the eye. And there's a reason for this. Now I'm going to lift the floss up on top of the hook shank and wrap the thread back toward the bend, edge to edge wraps, trapping the floss so the floss is exactly right on top. And one of the unique characteristics of this pattern is that the floss used for the first half of the body is cut off now, right about there, and left just like that. That is part of the pattern. It looks kind of funny, but that's just part of the pattern. Now, this is one unique step in this fly that you typically would not have to do. But when we finish dressing this fly, we're actually going to place it inside of a Christmas tree ornament. And so you have to be very careful about how we take this next step. And the next step is actually securing a piece of monofilament to the fly that'll be used to suspend the fly down into the bulb. And then we tie the monofilament off up here with this ring, around this ring, put this on the tree. We have an ornament, and there's a lot of glare with these lights, but this hangs on the tree and you can see the ornament then on the inside. So to make this hang just right, we'll take a piece of monofilament. Now this is 7x 0.004. And what you do with this is take the tag end, pull that off of the spool of tippet 7x, and on that tag end, I'll tie a loop and secure it with a Duncan or a uni knot. And it's really simple. Now I'll just slide this loop over the fly, and I want to precisely get that loop to be right about above where my thread is. And now with the standing line on the tippet, I simply pull straight up, just like you would on the eye of a hook, secure it. Cut off my tag end. Now I've got a piece of monofilament right about the middle, or a little forward of the middle. And this is what we're going to use to drop this fly inside the Christmas tree ornament bulb and then secure it. The other thing I do with this is you can't see it, but I've got a gallows tool right above my vise tonight for this process. And I'll secure the tag end of the monofilament into my material keeper there. Now I'm ready to continue with the next element, and I'm going to secure this just a little bit right there. Nice and tight on top. The next step here is to dress the peacock herl body. Now at this point, what I'm looking at is from where the thread is hanging to a spot just behind the eye, I need to be able to put several wraps of peacock herl. I need to have a hair wing and actually then a hackle. There's not a lot of room to do that, so we have to be very precise in where all of this goes. Now I can use strung hackle very easily, but I just wanted to point out that at the eye end of the peacock feather, the herl up at this end is a little more full. And for a nice kind of pattern like this, I like to use the herl right off of the feather, not strung. Cut those off. Then I try to align the forward edge of the rachis, both of those together. Lay this in place, catch it, wrap it forward. And once again, I'll do that same technique. I'll leave the thread right at the base. And now I want to wrap these two peacock herls forward and stop right about there. I can probably get maybe 3 or 4 turns. And I really like the way having your thread hanging like that keeps those flues off of the peacock herl nice and straight, and you don't get any spaces, and it really, I think, looks much better. Tie that off. Secure that. Edge to edge wraps going forward. I don't put a wrap over the preceding wrap. The only time I do that is if I'm dressing deer hair, spinning deer hair. Otherwise, I never wrap over the preceding wrap. At this point now, I'm going to wrap the metal tinsel forward. And to help in doing that, I'm actually going to pull this tag end of the floss forward and just hold it in place there. Now, this is why it was important to precisely place the tie-in of this metal tinsel about 3 o'clock. Very typical, very traditional on salmon flies. You want to make sure that the first rib on the body, and I've got a little bit of a challenge because remember, I've got a piece of monofilament sitting right there. The point of tying in precisely about 3 o'clock is so that the material, in this case, ribbing, metal, gold tinsel, when it comes underneath the bottom of the hook shank and I start to go over the top, I'm going to have a little space between the rib and the tag or the tip. And it's traditional to keep a space between the first rib wrap. I'm going to hold that in place with my thumb, pooch that around the monofilament. There's the second one. Now I want to make sure my spacing is pretty close to exact. And there's 3. I want to remember to undo that that floss, let that fall back again. Now the 4th one goes into the peacock, and a 5th one. Tie those off on the bottom. Now, if this was a display fly, what I would actually do is cut this metal tinsel off right about here. And then with my thumb and index finger thumbnails, I grab that tag end of the metal tinsel and pull down on it, stroke it down until that metal tinsel unravels. Pull that off of the thread core of the metal tinsel, snap that off, and then all I have is this very small piece of thread on the inside of this that I cut off. There's no bumps. And there's a great interest in salmon fly tying to eliminate bulk and avoid bumps. So I can cut that off on the bottom. I'm going to start to prepare a little ramp right here. It's not the head. It's going to be a ramp where the fox hair and a hackle will be tied in. The next step is to dress a wing, which is fox hair. And if I cut off a piece off of the hide, I cut that off and it looks like this. Fox has a lot of fur in it. And I actually want to dress this material on the hook in the fly with no fur. So I want to get all that fur out of there. And one thing I'll do is by wetting my index finger and thumb, I can very gently come over here and I can pull out big clumps of fur. It's important that you hold this by the tips. You can pull huge, look how big that look at that. All that fur just came out of there in one pull. Don't build up a lot of static. So then you end up with a piece of hair with all of the fur removed. Now we're going to dress this hair as a wing. And I'm going to do a little different technique here. It's important that this wing extend back as far as it can, at least to the length of the tail, if not slightly beyond. One of the things that I think is important in tying is that you should have your elements, the materials you're going to tie in should be prepared before they go to the hook. So that's the length I'm looking for right here. I'm going to change hands. Cut that one more time straight. Now I'm going to tie this in right where the thread is hanging. Now remember, I've got a little bit of an obstacle because that piece of monofilament's hanging down right there. But here's what I want to do. It's important for this wing to be compressed tightly at the tie-in spot and set in at an angle very similar to what you see there with that piece of floss. In order to do that, I can do this with Fox because one of the things that fly tyers learn about hair flies, hair wings, is selecting hair that's very compressible. Fox, Finnish raccoon, they're all very compressible, meaning when you put a thread wrap around them, you can really compress the bundle of hair. Sometimes we hear fly tyers say they don't like to work with squirrel because it's slippery. Well, actually, squirrel has a little bit of slipperiness to it, but the problem with hurl is it's a very hard hair and does not compress. So if you can take, if this was squirrel, we could take a tie-in spot here and really crank down on this to tie in. And after we finish tying it in, we come up here right in the middle of this. I could pull out a whole bundle of hair because with squirrel, it does not compress well. Fox compresses very well. So I've got a little tip right here sticking out. Got a few stragglers there I'll get rid of. Okay. Now I'm going to tie this in just a little bit differently in that's the tie-in spot right there. But instead of laying that on the hook shank and going over it in a traditional fashion, I'm going to flatten my thread just a little bit. I'm going to do a pinch, go around the other far side of the hair, and instead of coming under the hook, I'm actually going to come up and do a second pinch, go around the far side, and now I'll run the tying thread under the hook shank and pull straight up. And what's happening now is those two loops are compressing the fox hair while it's pulling it down to the hook shank. I can do some securing wraps. Now this is not the head. This is actually beginning to build the ramp for the hackle. That will be next. Get snug up to the base. And now I'm going to remove my hands. I think that's exactly what I'm looking for. Now I'm going to take the traditional rusty rat or rat patterns call for grizzly hackle at this point to be tied in right here. Because this is going to go into a tree ornament bulb for Christmas, I'm actually going to use a feather from a silver badger, and simply because it's red. And my strategy with this is I want these barbs to be long, maybe not as long as I typically would use, but one thing you find on a furnace type feather marking like this is this dark area in here is called the list, L-I-S-T. And if you notice on this silver badger feather, the list starts small and widens as it goes down the rachis. And when that widens, it actually reduces the length of the red tip. So I'm going to select a feather. I'm going to take all the fluff off the bottom that I don't need. And then I'm going to prepare this by going right to the tip of the feather. If I can take the fluff off the bottom, grasp the tip, well, I'm getting stuck in that monofilament there. Okay. This is the silver badger feather. And by simply going down the rachis, I'm separating all those barbs out to the side like that. I want to try to use this feather closest to the tip simply because I've got more length of red tip here, and it reduces as I go back. And this is red. On the monitor there, it looks kind of orange, but this is actually red. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tie this in now. This is a step I would not normally take. I'm going to tie this in right there where the thread is hanging. Right here. I'm going to do some edge-to-edge wraps toward the eye. Hold this back. Now do some wraps toward the bend. Then cut off the tip of that feather. I want to be very careful I don't cut my wing in the process. Now here's the step I'm going to take that I would not normally take, because the next step is I'm going to, before I palmer this hackle around the hook shank, I typically would place this hackle in a hackle plier that I have attached to the stem of my vise. I would attach this feather to the hackle plier just like you see it here, because one of the things I like to do is fold hackle before I dress it. Now, I would typically be doing this on the post, but it's easier for you all to see it right here. I'm going to take my scissors now. There's several ways to do this. You can do it with your fingers. I like to do it with my scissors. I'll take the inside edge of one of my scissors point and go right up here to the top. I'm not pulling hard on this feather with the butt end, because it would certainly pull it away. I'm just securing it. I'm just going to allow my edge of my scissor to run down the rachis, and in so doing, I'm bending those barbs. And I can go down, come up again, and do that as many times as I need to do it. Roll it over. Do the same thing on the right side. And I'll show you why I like to do this. Now if you can see that, you can see how those barbs are now bent, or they're going like an arrow going backwards. So I'm going to advance my thread to where I want it to stop the wing, and the remainder being my head. I'm going to try to get rid of some of these little guys that aren't cooperating here. All right, now we're going to wrap this hackle. Now I can still wrap the hackle like we traditionally would, holding it up at 12 o'clock and then taking a finger and a thumb and pulling it back, but it's already going back. So I like to put a bodkin in my right hand. I'm going to go around the hook shank. Now watch what happens. When I come up, there are no feather barbs trapped. I'm going to do another edge-to-edge wrap going forward. No barbs being trapped. That's about as much as I think we need. So I'm going to take my thread, wind it up through those barbs, secure the hackle. And now I'm going to pull it backward and put a couple wraps in front of it and help to pinch that down just a little bit. Upside down, small nose, small tip scissors. Cut it clean. And now to clean this up, I can pull this back and do a couple wraps toward the bend, which will secure all those hackle barbs in place. Looks like I've got a little one. You know, when we do this on camera, we tend to be able to see little things like that that are sticking up. It might not be able to see it otherwise. Then what I'll do is make sure I've got that head built the way I want it. Move my thread back against the tie-in, and you can use your fingers or a tool. And I'll do a short whip finish from the back, edge to edge, whip finish going forward toward the eye. One more. Now the whip finish is a knot. So what I'm doing right here is closing the knot, but because it's a knot, every knot has to be seated. I don't have to pull hard, but just a slight tug and that'll seat that knot. Sometimes we leave that step off and we wonder, why did that head unravel? Maybe the fish teeth got it. That's what we always seem to say. Now I'll take just a little bit of UV resin. I don't want a big drop. And I know you all have heard this before, but anytime I've got resin or glue or anything, I'll cut about 2/3 or sometimes 75% of the bristles off of the applicator that comes with it, because there's too many and it makes the drop you're putting on there too big. So I can just put a slight drop. I want to be careful not to let the UV run up the hackle. I just put a drop on the top, and here's why. Charlie Craven emphasized on curing. This cures it too quickly, but if you move the light away a little bit and keep it moving, it'll cure better. And now I don't know if there's any validity to this or not, but something that seems to work for me. So after I do that, I'll come back here, and I don't want a whole drop. I just want to put a little more UV on top of that. And now what happens, that UV resin will roll around the first drop I put on there and secure the sides and the bottom. I keep the fly moving, keep the torch far enough away. Okay. Now, most of the time we would say, good, we just finished dressing that fly. Well, now we're going to take the next step in the Christmas spirit, and we're actually going to drop this inside of a bulb. Now, one thing I want to emphasize here, I emphasized getting all that fur out of the hair. And here you can see why. If there was still a lot of fur in that hair, that tippet would not be able to go forward like it just did right there. That hair would keep it away from going forward. And it's important now that I want to try to make sure that this tippet is kind of like right down the middle of that hair. Kind of like that. All right. Now, here's we okay on time, Al?
Dutch, you're doing great. I'm sitting here with my mouth hanging open in wonder of all the stuff that I'm learning. So you just take your time there, buddy. You're doing great.
Thank you. All right, here's the ornament, and you can purchase these at Michael's, at Hobby Lobby, places like that. Those big white circles you see are not on the bulb. That's the reflection of I've got a ring light over here. Maybe if I turn that off, there, I might help a little bit. So I've got this bulb. They're not very expensive. You can get, this is a good size right here. Sometimes I get them where the bulb, instead of being round like this, it's actually flat. It's about an inch wide, but it's flat. And I've given a lot of those bulbs to people that they actually use as wall hangings. They'll put that fly on their wall, and it's there year round. It's not just during Christmas. So here's what we're going to do now. We're going to take the top off of this. It's got these two little metal pieces right here that have spring loaded. But if we look at the top of this, we can see there's a hole where that ring is. And that's important in this process. Here's why. We're going to take our fly now. I'm going to take this monofilament. I'm going to drop it head first into the bulb. And just let it fall to the bottom. Now our fly is laying there on the bottom. Next step is I'm going to take the tag end of this tippet, it's monofilament. Might be hard to see, but the tag end is right there. Now I'm going to take this cap off of the bulb. And I'm going to run the tippet through that opening. Coming out the top. Now I can pull the tippet through the top without holding on to the tippet. If I hold on to the tippet and try to close this lid, it pulls the fly to the top. I don't want to do that. So I'm going to try to close this lid now and turn that cap onto the ornament. So now we got a fly laying in the bottom of the ornament, and we got a piece of monofilament coming out the opening here in the top. So the first thing I'm going to do now, I'm going to turn my vise out of the way so you might be able to see this a little better. I'm going to take the tippet, see where it is. I'm going to just hold it down with my finger. Take the tag end, find the tip, run it through the circle. And it's just about as hard to see this as it is when you're standing in the river. Now I can pull on that tag end of the monofilament, and it's actually going to put a little overhand deal around that ring. Okay. I'm going to do one more, hold that down, run the tag end through the circle, close that slowly. Now here's the last step, or next to last step. I'm actually going to grab a pair of pliers or tweezers. Now I'm going to run the tag end of this tippet through that ring one last time, the third time. Now this time I'm going to hold on to this tag end. I can see do I have it? Where is it? There it is. Okay, I'm going to hold on to the tag end. I've got this loop that was formed. Run these tweezers through there, grab a hold of that tag end and pull it through, slowly closing that, and I'm putting like a half hitch right on that ring. Last step. I don't want a big drop, a drop of UV right on top of that monofilament. Zap the top of the ornament there right on that ring, curing the monofilament. Cut off the tag end of the monofilament. There's a rusty rat inside of a Christmas tree ornament. And who wouldn't want that for Christmas?
That is lovely, Dutch. Absolutely lovely.
So there it is. So Al, Gretchen, that is a rusty rat Christmas ornament inside a Christmas tree ornament bulb. You know, the rusty rat was created in 1911 by a fellow named Roy Angus Thompson, R.A.T. And his initials were used for the first fly. And the first fly was simply called the rat pattern. And the rat pattern did not have any floss on the body. And Roy, after creating the rat, created the gray rat, the silver rat, and the gold rat, all of those referring to the color of floss on the body. And it became so popular that Roy and a few others decided to go further. And they then created a copper, blue, black crystal, fluorescent green, reeds orange, red rat, king rat, rusty, black, brown. So there's a lot of different rat patterns, but they all follow very similar profile. So that's it.
That's awesome. Before we wind anything up here, Dutch, I would like you to talk about the FFI Learning Center. That is just totally awesome.
Well, Al, thank you. The Learning Center has developed very nicely. In 2015, the Fly Fishers International Board of Directors adopted a new strategic plan. And here's what's crazy. You know, this organization was founded in 1965, right there in Oregon. And at the beginning, the founders said the three pillars of this organization are going to be education, conservation, and community. And so the organization started to develop and evolve. And many years later, people like Mel Krieger and others started pounding on the table saying, you know what? We've got a world-class certified casting instructor program. We've got a great fly tying program. We're not doing anything to teach people how to fly fish. So in 2015, the board adopted a new strategic plan that required the development of an education outreach program. And I was fortunate to be on the board at the time. And Len Zickler and Tom Logan asked if I would chair a brand new education committee. And the first order of business was to create a learning center. Right from the very beginning, we decided, well, for all four resource areas had to be included. Casting, tying, fly fishing skills, conservation. All four resource areas have to be included. Everything that goes into the Learning Center had to be subject to an editorial process plus a quality assurance process, and everything was beta tested before we even started the editorial process. Everything was fine-tuned, went through the editorial process, quality assurance, then it was uploaded into the Learning Center. We're very pleased what's in there right now, but what I find kind of amusing is that in 2015, when that new strategic plan was adopted and required development of an education outreach, it's specific. One of the tasks for the new education committee was build a curriculum for the Learning Center. The next task was, once you build a curriculum for the Learning Center, keep going. There is no finish line. So there's no end to our effort to develop new material for the Learning Center. The metrics, the analytics tell us that we're getting hits on that thing from 6 countries. One of the things we hoped for was that fly fishing clubs from around the country would be able to download all the material, anything they wanted, free of charge, and use that as a club meeting for those, especially those clubs that don't have budgets, in order to bring in speakers and that type of thing. So that's exactly what's happened. We continue to develop the program. The casting instruction part of it is just incredible. It's gone beyond casting instruction. It's been modified now to include a casting development program for individuals and groups. Now the most recent thing is we just finished a project of finishing a 23 fly saltwater manual a manual of 23 saltwater flies. And this was put together by members of the fly tying group from around the country. So it's not just saltwater flies for the East Coast or West Coast or the Gulf. It flies from all those areas. And the most recent thing now is that we've actually put a new structure in the fly fishing skills portion. There's 5 levels. First one is an individual just goes to the website, goes to the Learning Center, and just starts exploring of all the things that are available to them. The second and third level are classes, workshops that we actually provided during the expo last month. The fourth level is a monthly workshop we're going to do, where we'll have a 2-hour workshop once a month on one specific fly fishing skill. And in the top level, and this is really quite an advancement, we have developed, it's ready to go, a fly fishing skills instructor certification program to where a person will attend an in-person 2-day workshop, just like the certified casting instructor program. And at the conclusion of that, they will be certified as a fly fishing skills instructor. But we got so many things in the queue, Al, that are just exciting, new things developing all the time. So we're very excited. We're on the cusp of, we just got a grant to do a partnership with Trout Unlimited to take the youth education fly fishing program we've developed and collaborate with Trout Unlimited in the administration of that program to all of their clubs and all of the FFI clubs. So I mean, that's really, really exciting, but so many things like that going on, and we're getting a great response from folks. And one of the key things from the fly tying point of view, I should mention, in addition to the award program and all the things like that are in the Learning Center, Fred Dupre has been managing the fly tying video library from the beginning. And if I'm not mistaken, Fred, I think right now we have about 2,000 flies that are in this video library. And Fred and members of the fly tying group have vetted every single one of them. There's no Bubba in the garage in any of this stuff. They're all legitimate professional tires. I mean, good education. And one thing that Fred did to put this together, it's the only database like it in the whole world, where you go to the homepage of the video library and you can sort. You can select freshwater, saltwater, and so forth. You can select species. So you can do several sorts, and then you hit the go button, and that 2,000 inventory of fly videos condenses down and shows you the videos that are compatible with the sort that you provided. I mean, there's no database like it anywhere. So Fred has done a marvelous job with that, and there's so many things like that that are really exciting about the FFI Learning Center. But thank you for asking, Al. I appreciate that.
I apologize again for not printing out and reading your introduction, but thank you for taking the time to share the Learning Center with us. Everyone, go to the Fly Fishers International. Just do a Google search. If you've not been to the website, just do Fly Fishers International. It'll come up flyfishersinternational.org. Go there, explore. You might even join. I mean, it wouldn't kill you to put $35 towards the love of your sport, your hobby. I mean, you buy a round of drinks in a bar and it costs you $100. I mean, so
That's right.
what's $35 to, or whatever the membership fee is now, to your favorite sport?
It's actually 25 if you're a senior.
Ah,
Yes.
Oh, well, we all qualify for that then, don't we?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, the weekly tip. We're going to talk a little bit more about split thread options. Just kind of a reversal of what we did last week.
I haven't seen this. I'm looking forward to it.
It's the same thing we did last week. I'll put a new twist on it, but the new twist causes a problem that we'll have to deal with. And for that, let's just go here. Anyway, there we are. That's the one I tied just before tonight's presentation so that you can see where we're going. Now, the one we did last week is this one. And if you'll recall, we tied that one by laying the fibers in, pointing backward, tying them down, standing them up, and making a soft tackle. We're going to reverse the process by laying the fibers pointing forward this time, pushing them back, and basically doing the same thing, building a soft tackle, smaller soft tackle. This is a 14, by the way, both of them are. A soft tackle out of a larger feathers. Feathers that probably, on the ones I'm using tonight, would probably be used on a size 6, and we're going to be using them on a 14. So let me set this guy down from last week. Pick up a hook. Get it anchored in there. Bring my thread up, and I'll just attach it right here at the front of the hook. I'll leave probably 2, maybe an eye width and a half space there, and just wrap back a short distance and then back to my starting point. And I will throw a quick half hitch in there. Now, we need to flatten the thread. Remember last week we had to flatten the thread to apply the fibers without having them twist. And that's kind of an important feature. And most people who are used to using a split thread dubbing loop, they flatten it just like I'm doing right now. And they get a nice spot right up in here over their finger that's flat. They split it open, shove their dubbing in there, and let it close, and then it spins. It spins because there's pent up energy in this back part here, and in this section here, and all through the barrel. And it's important that we actually get rid of the twists in the thread all the way from the hook all the way to the spool, like right here. Well, so it takes a little bit of time to do that. And one of the ways that I found that works really well is to just take your time and gradually raise it and allow it to twist. Keep looking though, like I am off camera, by the way, down at the spool, because what I'm looking is to see if there's any twists between the spool and the barrel. And I'll bring it up slowly. And when you've got them most out and you bring them up very, very slow, like I'm doing right now, almost 0 turns on that bobbin. So that tells me that I've got a flat thread all the way from the hook down to the spool. Now I can go ahead and split and get my dubbing loop started. Now I'll just slip my finger in there, lay this bodkin aside. And I've got just a couple of, in fact, let's go for a minute and just take a quick look over at the materials. Just so you can see what we're using for materials, I just took a couple feathers out of the modeled feathers right there, kind of in the center, the back of the bird. They're probably, like I said, about size 6 if you were to put them on a hook without doing anything to them. Those are the ones that I have here that I'm going to be using right now in my clip. Let me just set this aside. Throw one of those feathers away and let's see which one. Well, let's see. Here's a feather. It's got some tore out of it. Well, I might as well use it up because I'm going to tear the feather up anyway. So let me just get the waste off of the base of the feather. And I want you to notice that I have the dull side facing the camera, and I'll turn it around. The shiny side was away from the camera. But now the dull side is back towards the camera. That means that the tips are kind of curled up with the dull side pointing up, just so you know how we're oriented. Now I'm going to pull these out to the side. I want to keep those fibers as straight as I can. I'll grab them by the tips of my fingers and tear them away from the stem, lay that stem down, and now I have them in my right hand held by the butts. Now I'll turn it around. And slip these fibers in between. And what I like to do is I'll slip it all the way up to the hook, and my right hand is pinching the hook, and the thread at the same time. Otherwise, they kind of have a tendency to get away from me. Now, what I'm going to do is just take a quick wrap around the hook with those fibers pointing forward. Trim off the waist. All right. Now what I want to do is just kind of spread these around a bit. And boy, I got that sparse. Let me tell you what. It's so terribly sparse. I'm going to try something I've never done before. Never have I tried to add a second feather. So we're gonna play tonight, and I could have just an absolute train wreck here, but I think you all know what direction everything's going here anyway, so it isn't like I'm going to be surprised to anybody. So let's try a second feather. All right. And let's see, here's a feather right here. I've got a few fibers left on it. Tear those off, turn them around, slip them in. I got to pull them back so they line up with the ones that are already there. And I think I recovered slightly. Let me just take a look here. Yeah, that looks pretty good. I'm going to kind of squiggle them around the hook. Cut off the waist. The cool thing about this particular kind of application is I can tell you right now, I don't have consistent placement of those fibers around the hook shank, but there's a real easy way to get that. Let me just wrap out here a short distance, and I'll leave this orange hang down, and I'll just grab some black thread, and we'll use it as if it was floss, and we'll wrap a temporary body. One of the things I want you to notice is another really fast way to make a body is if you have your rib material on a bobbin, you can use the weight of that bobbin to help place that rib material right square on the bottom of the hook shank. Now I'll just wrap forward here till I get to the front, and I'll stop right there. Cut off the waist. Get out my whip finish tool. Oh, I better back up. I came forward just a bit. There we go. Take a couple of turns of thread right behind that hackle. And I'll trim away. Now we'll just add our rib using this orange thread. And we want to throw a half hitch in there right there. The half hitch is really important because what you cannot do, I'll explain to you before I put the half hitch in. If you try to pull these fibers back and shove that thread through there, the thread torque is going to take a good bundle of those and push them away, and there's going to be a gap that's impossible to deal with in the hackle. So let me put the half hitch on. Let's see, here we go. There it is. And I like to do a hand one. You cannot do it with a tool because of the hackle being there. I'll lay that right in there the way I want it. And I think the way I put that half hitch in, it's probably positioned on the bottom of the hook. Let's take a look. Would you do a quick tight shot, Gretchen? Hit a 1 there, number 1 up above.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, and let's take a look. You can see that that is anchored right at the bottom. That's what we wanted to see. Okay, and now I'm going to quickly take a look at these fibers and kind of move them around a bit. And what I need to do is bring the thread forward without misaligning the fibers of the hackle fibers. Well, what I'm going to do now is this is a drink straw. Now, you can get those at Costco, a big bag of them, about 10,000. They're good for 2 flights too, or save them from the bar if you happen to go to a bar. I don't go to a bar anymore, so I bought 10,000 at Costco. Or you can send me a letter and ask, or send me an email, and I'll send you some straws. I got lots of them. Anyway, we're going to push this back. I want you to notice how I push that all the way back. It's pushing my thread back too. But what I can do is then grab those fibers, and the thread falls right in line with a slot where it lines up going through that hackle. Now I can kind of dress it back with my fingers, gently bring the thread forward and take a soft turn, 2 turns around the hook. Now we've anchored it without misaligning fibers. And now we just wrap a small thread head and a jam nut that builds the head on our fly. Now, I wouldn't say that adding a second feather in was a roaring success, but it's sure a lot better than it was when I started. I have to tell you, the one I tied when I wasn't under the fire of being live on the internet was a heck of a lot better, but that's good enough. That's good enough to give you the idea of what you can do. Now I have one more tip. This comes from Jerry Chris and something I accidentally discovered this afternoon. Okay, Jerry Chris explained to us how to use these guys to thread your bobbins. What that is a dental floss threader from the drugstore. It's really great, except for one thing. The blunt end that you see there does not go through a ceramic tip worth a darn. You can hardly get the darn thing to go through there. It hangs up all the time. And Jerry said, well, melt the thing. And that's what I've done there. And that allows it to kind of round it and slips through real easy. Well, the other thing that's a real pain in the neck, let me unstring this orange one, is this is monofilament, this stuff. And so I can slip it into my bobbin. And my bobbin barrels are very long, and I have a heck of a time pushing it beyond the end of the barrel. These keep slipping back on me. I said, oh, dang, that's just frustrating as heck. So I decided to try something different. I've got this type of a hackle pliers. Let me get this out of the way. This type of a hackle pliers. And when you put it in that loop, well, shoot. When you put it in the loop, I just broke it. But anyway, when you put it in the loop there, it collapses that loop, making it a lot easier to slide into your bobbin and come out the other end. Anyway, another disaster, but hey, folks, that happens on live television and on BT's Fly Tying Friday as well. But anyway, you kind of get the idea. Take the tips, work on them. I guarantee you the hackle is a good one. It just make sure that you don't have the feathers slipping around in your fingers like I did. Any questions?
No, but I was going to say, Al, one thing you might do is you might even take a bead of UV cement and make your loop on that thing really small. You know, this loop
Yes, good idea. Very good
or
idea.
some kind of a little clamp, like even a piece of split shot or something, and just
Yeah, well, either that or just a couple wraps of thread, and then, like you said, UV glue it.
yeah, same thing. Just make the loop smaller.
Yeah, because you just need to collapse the thing so it don't keep pushing you out of the barrel. Anyway, that's thanks to Jerry Chris and Chuck Ballard. And when we were working on it, you'll all get a way to do it. Any questions?
Kathy has a question about using schloppen.
Okay, schloppen. Oh, you mean to? Yes, you can use it. I have found it's a lot more difficult to get a really good small hackle. The webbier the feather, the more difficult the small hackle is to form. That's just what I found. But if you sit down and tie 100 flies, I'll guarantee you, after you get through doing 100 flies, you will figure out some way to make it come apart. Or you can use a Jim Ferguson method or the salmon fly guy's method of bleaching it a little bit with bleach and water mix and taking some of that natural webbiness or the stick togetherness of the webby feathers and take it away. But thanks for joining us, everybody, on this Friday. We're here every Friday. Love to have you join us. But for tonight, that's a wrap.